Welcome to this video where we'll talk about Photoshop's interface and where you should focus your energy when working on a project. I'm going to use Photoshop CC without an artboard, but everything I'm about to say applies in CS6 too. Okay, in Photoshop you have two main areas that require the vast majority of your attention. The first one is the white part here, and it's called the canvas. This is where all the magic happens, where you draw, paint, lay out things, and so on. This is where your focus should be at all times, because this is the most important part. The rest of the interface is there for supporting purposes. Directly related to the canvas is the Layers panel, which you can open by going to Window, Layers. Once you identify it, it should remain open no matter the project. The Layers panel is the second most important part of your interface after the canvas. These two are interconnected, so whatever happens in one place is also reflected on the other side. Let me give you an example. Say I'll add a rectangle on my canvas, right? Well, that immediately shows up in the Layers panel. Here it is. On the other end, I'm going to make it partially transparent by adjusting its opacity from the Layers panel. As you can see, the change is immediately visible on the canvas as well. So the canvas number 1 and the Layers panel number 2 are permanently connected, and they offer a different perspective of the same thing. So think about driving a car. The canvas is the road in front of you that you can see through your windscreen, while the Layers panel is the dashboard. You glance at it from time to time to get important information like speed, revs, fuel levels, etc. All that information is vital for your safe driving, because without it, you'd be in the dark. On the other end, if you always look at the Layers panel, that would be the car's dashboard, you'll end up hugging a tree really fast. Your eyes have to be on the road. So try to divide your attention between these two with a slight emphasis on the canvas. Let's move to item 3 on our list. On the left side, you have your Tools panel or toolbar. This area of Photoshop should be accessed 90% of the time by way of your hotkeys. Like I said, the canvas is the hero here, so your mouse cursor should hover over that area at all times. If you want to grab a tool, just use your hotkeys. You'll start learning them soon enough. Each one has a different effect on the canvas, and there are a lot of restrictions and combinations you're going to learn. For now, it's important you understand how a tool is selected. You either use its hotkey or you click on it. Some of them contain other tools which are hidden underneath. To see them, you can click and hold, or what I generally use is their hotkeys and Shift. Take the brush tool. Its hotkey is B. Once I press it, it's now active, and you can tell by its darker shade here, as well as these settings that just popped up at the top. Let me switch to another one, and now back to the brush tool. See the difference? If I click and hold, we can see other tools underneath. So you can select the pencil tool by using your cursor, but the more efficient way is to use Shift-B to cycle through them. That's what I'm currently doing, and you can see a new icon comes forward as I continue to press. The last thing you should know at this point is that you always have a tool selected. That's just how Photoshop works. My advice is that you keep the Move tool active, which is the very first one on the list. Okay, that's the toolbar, which is priority number 3. Moving along, at the top of Photoshop we have this menu, which contains all sorts of options and features. We'll use it from time to time, but the most important ones have hotkeys, and it's much faster to use those instead of going through them here. So with that said, it lands at number 4 in my book. It doesn't have a name per se, so we'll just call it the top menu. Immediately underneath it, you have an area which changes constantly depending on what tool you have selected. We just talked about it, and its name is the Options bar. Right now I have the first tool active, the Move tool. If I click on something else, notice how this area changes. Basically, this is your information zone where you can see and modify the settings for each tool. This is fairly important, but it really depends on the type of work you're doing. You could put it in last place, or it could go as high as number 3. It's all about how you choose to work. It's time for a quick recap. 1. The canvas. 2. The Layers panel. 3. The toolbar. 4. The top menu. 5. The Options bar, with the first 2 being essential and the last one having that disclaimer. Going back to the canvas, remember we made a new document? This is set up in a tab. If we repeat the process, so Ctrl-N, you'll see a second tab has appeared. This is called Untitled 2 because we didn't choose a name for it. To browse between them, you can use Control-Tab. That's the most efficient way. Remember, the goal is to keep your cursor around the canvas area. Alternatively, you can simply click on its name and it will be brought into focus. Let's check out the naming structure. It's Untitled 1 at 100%. This means the project has no name, untitled meaning no title, and we're looking at it without being zoomed in or out, so we're at 100% zoom level. Easy enough. After that, it says RGB/8, which refers to the color profile. RGB stands for red, green, and blue, and 8 is the number of bits per channel. Now notice something. If I do anything inside the project, say I draw a shape, the name changes. We get Untitled 1 at 100% as before, but now we have Shape 1 RGB/8, followed by a star or an asterisk, whatever you want to call it. Shape 1 is the current layer that's selected. If I rename it to Chris, this is also reflected in the tab. So Photoshop is kind enough to let you know what the currently selected layer is. More importantly, the asterisk shows you the project is unsaved. This is very useful because it's a reminder to save your progress. The reasons for that are obvious. So if you see this symbol, that means the document is not saved and you should use Ctrl+S. Please note that when we created the project, we didn't choose any specific place on our hard drive, so everything that happened so far is not saved anywhere. The first time you use Ctrl+S, you'll be asked for a specific folder. Let's do that now. Then, as I continue to work, I can hit Ctrl+S and there won't be any interruptions. It's just going to save quietly. That doesn't mean you have to make the asterisk go away each and every time, and that's because any change whatsoever will make it appear again. Its role is to get you to notice the state of the project. Moving on, Photoshop works with panels. If you go to Window at the top, you'll see you have a ton of them. Remember we opened up the Layers panel that way. This seems a bit overwhelming, but please keep in mind that you don't have to work with all of them. We'll actually use just 4 or 5 in our web design work. Opening and closing them is really simple, and we'll jump into that next. One thing before we go is that all I described so far, the interface, has a name. It's called the workspace. You can customize it in all sorts of ways, so let's find out how we can do that in the next lecture.